close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a field. Not a field of flowers, not a field from a painting, a cotton field. In Texas, in the blazing summer of 1900, the sun is merciless. The air is thick with dust and heat, and bending low between the endless white rows is a little girl. She is 8 years old. Her fingers are raw. Her back already aches. She has no shoes on her feet. She has no birth certificate. Her parents cannot read or write. And yet, this little girl has a secret. Every single time she hears a story, every time someone comes back from somewhere else, every time a traveler passes through Waxahachie, Texas, every time she reads a book by firelight in the evenings, she thinks to herself, one day, I will amount to something. Her name was Bessie Coleman. And she didn't just amount to something. She became the first black woman in the entire world to earn a pilot's license. The woman who flew loops and barrel rolls over stadiums of 10,000 screaming fans. The woman who walked on the wings of a plane at 2,000 feet in the air. The woman who looked a nation in the eye and said, "The air is the only place free from prejudice." But here is what no one tells you when they mention the name Bessie Coleman. She didn't have a mentor. She didn't have a wealthy family. She didn't have a government grant, a scholarship, a famous last name, or a single powerful friend in the right room. What she had was a dream so strong, a will so unbreakable, a refusal so complete, that when every single door in America was locked against her, she didn't knock louder. She built her own door. This is not a story about talent. This is not a story about luck. This is a story about what happens when an ordinary person, from the most ordinary and difficult of beginnings, decides that the world's opinion of what is possible is simply none of their business. Stay with me, because what Bessie Coleman did in her 34 years on this earth will change the way you think about your limits for the rest of your life. January 26, 1892, Atlanta, Texas. One-room dirt floor cabin. Into this cabin, into this family, into this world, Bessie Coleman arrived as the 10th of 13 children. 13 children. Born to George and Susan Coleman. Both of them the children of enslaved people. Both of them unable to read or write. Both of them spending their lives bent over someone else's land, picking cotton for wages that were never quite enough. George Coleman was part African American, part Native American, likely Cherokee or Choctaw. Susan Coleman was African American, strong-willed, deeply religious, and raising a family in the shadow of Jim Crow, the brutal system of racial segregation that made black life in the American South a daily act of survival. This was not just poverty. This was poverty plus fear. In Jim Crow, Texas, a black man could be lynched for making eye contact with the wrong person. A black family could be run off their land by night riders with torches. A black child could be expelled from school, if they could even find a school that would take them. And into this world, Bessie was born. When she was 2 years old, the family moved to Waxahachie, Texas. George Coleman scraped together enough money to buy a quarter-acre of land and build a small 3-room house. For a black sharecropping family in 1894, owning even a tiny piece of land was a remarkable act of defiance. But when Bessie was 9 years old, her father left. George Coleman walked away from his family to return to the Oklahoma territories, where Native Americans had more rights, more freedom, more dignity. He never came back. Think about what that does to a child. Not just the economic devastation, not just the hunger that follows, but the deep, quiet wound of being left behind. Susan Coleman now had to hold everything together alone. She hired herself out as a cook and housemaid, working in white households, while her children went to the cotton fields to earn whatever they could, and that included little Bessie. But here is where Bessie Coleman's story begins to separate itself from the ordinary, because while Bessie Coleman was in the cotton fields, she was also in the schoolhouse. She walked 4 miles to school every day, each way, on feet that were often bare, to attend a 1-room segregated schoolhouse where a single teacher handled all 8 grades, with almost no textbooks, no paper, no pencils. And yet, Bessie Coleman was the star student in mathematics. Every number made sense to her. Every pattern, every problem. Her mind was a precision instrument, wrapped in a cotton-picking girl's body. And every evening, when the chores were done and the younger children were in bed, Bessie read to her mother. She read to a woman who could not read herself. And in that act, in that tender daily act, you can see everything you need to know about who Bessie Coleman was. She did not hoard what she had. She shared it every single time. By the time she was 18, Bessie had saved enough money, coin by coin, dollar by dollar, from doing laundry for neighbors to enroll at Langston University in Oklahoma. This was extraordinary. A black girl from a sharecropper family, with no father, no savings, no connections, making it to university. But fate had other plans. After one semester, just one, the money ran out. She had to come home. Imagine that moment. Imagine packing your few belongings into a bag, walking back to Waxahachie, back to the cotton fields, back to the laundry tub, back to the world that seemed so determined to keep you small. Most people would have given up then. Most people would have said, "This is my life. This is the ceiling." But Bessie Coleman was not most people, because she had something that poverty couldn't touch, something that segregation couldn't confiscate, something that even a father's abandonment couldn't fully extinguish. She had a vision of something bigger. She just didn't know yet what it was. 1915. Bessie Coleman is 23 years old, and she makes a decision. She is done with Waxahachie, done with the cotton, done with the dust and the smallness and the ceiling that Jim Crow wanted to press down on every black life in the South. She packs her belongings. She buys a ticket north. She is heading to Chicago. In 1915, Chicago's South Side was the beating heart of Black America. The Great Migration was underway. Hundreds of thousands of Black Americans flooding north from the Jim Crow South, chasing wages, dignity, freedom. Chicago had jazz clubs and newspapers. It had Black-owned businesses and churches that doubled as community centers. It had Robert Abbott, founder of the Chicago Defender, one of the most powerful Black newspapers in the country. It had electricity, not just the kind in the wires, but the kind in the air. Bessie moved in with her brothers and quickly found work as a manicurist at the White Sox barber shop on the south side of Chicago. Now, you might think of that job as just a job, a way to survive. But for Bessie Coleman, it was a classroom. Every day, the men sitting in those barber chairs were soldiers, veterans, businessmen, dreamers. Every day, they talked, and Bessie listened. This was 1917, 1918. World War I was raging in Europe. Her brothers, Walter shipped overseas to fight in the segregated United States Army. And when they came home, they brought stories of France. Not just France the country, but France the idea. A place where a Black man could walk into a cafe and sit anywhere he chose. A place where a Black soldier was not called by slurs, but by his rank. A place where women, actual women, were already learning to fly airplanes. And one day, in the way brothers do, John Coleman teased his sister. He laughed and said, "French women can fly planes, Bessie. What do you think about that? They're better than you." It was a joke. It was the spark that lit the fire, because Bessie Coleman looked at her brother, and she felt something shift inside her. Not jealousy, not wounded pride, hunger. A hunger so sudden and so total that it felt like she had been starving for it all her life. Without knowing the name of the food, aviation, she wanted to fly. Let's stop here for a moment and really feel what this means. The year is 1918. The airplane has existed for only 15 years. The Wright brothers flew for the first time in 1903. Just 15 years earlier, aviation was still a young, dangerous, completely experimental field. Pilots were dying regularly. Planes were held together with wire and canvas. There were almost no civilian flight schools. And the ones that did exist? They did not accept women. They did not accept black people. And they certainly did not accept a black woman from a sharecropping family who worked as a manicurist on the south side of Chicago. But Bessie Coleman didn't see those walls, or rather, she did see them. She saw every single wall. She saw every locked door. She saw every face that would turn away from her, and she decided that she was going to fly anyway. She began to apply to flight schools, one by one. Rejection after rejection after rejection. Some schools didn't bother to reply at all. Some sent polite letters. Others were not polite. Imagine opening letter after letter, each one a door slamming in your face. Imagine the Saturday mornings when the rejection sits on the kitchen table, and you just stare at it. Imagine the voice in your own head, the one every human being has, whispering, "Maybe they're right. Maybe this isn't for someone like you." Now imagine choosing to ignore that voice, not silence it, not argue with it, just ignore it, and pick up the pen and write the next letter. That is what Bessie Coleman did. Enter Robert Abbott. Abbott was the founder of the Chicago Defender, the newspaper that had become the voice of Black America. He was one of the first black millionaires in the country. He was powerful, connected, and visionary. And when Bessie Coleman came to him, hat in hand, fire in her eyes, and told him she wanted to learn to fly, Abbott did not laugh. He did not send her away. He leaned forward, and he said, "Then go to France." And just like that, the problem that had been a wall became a door. France was different. France had already produced female aviators. France had flight schools that cared only about your ability to learn, not the color of your skin. Abbott agreed to write about her journey in The Defender. He connected her with other sponsors. He helped her secure the funding. But first, there was one more mountain to climb. To study in France, Bessie Coleman would need to speak French. She had never studied French. She had never been outside the United States. She had no passport. She barely had a suitcase. And yet, she enrolled in French language classes at a Berlitz school after her shifts at the barbershop, studying late into the nights, month after month. No one had written that script, so Bessie Coleman wrote it herself. In November of 1920, Bessie Coleman boarded a ship and crossed the Atlantic Ocean to France. She was 28 years old. She had never been on a ship. She had never seen the ocean. She had spent most of her life within a few hundred miles of the cotton fields where she was born. Think about what that crossing must have felt like, standing at the rail of that ship, watching America disappear below the horizon. Ahead, nothing but water, and everything she had ever wanted. She enrolled at the École d'Aviation des Frères Caudron in Le Crotoy, France, one of the finest aviation schools in the world. The school trained war pilots. The equipment was military grade. The instructors were legendary. And on her very first week of training, Bessie Coleman watched a fellow student die. A plane went into a spin. It came down fast. It hit the ground, and the student inside it did not walk away. The instructors watched Bessie Coleman carefully after that day. They expected fear. They expected hesitation. They expected her to pack her bags and go back to America. Instead, she showed up the next morning, goggles on, ready to fly. Because Bessie Coleman had not come this far, from the cotton fields of Waxahachie to the aviation school in France, to turn back because of fear. She had been afraid her whole life, afraid of poverty, afraid of hunger, afraid of what the world had decided she was worth. She was done being stopped by fear. June 15th, 1921. The sky above France is clear. A young woman climbs into a biplane. She pulls her goggles down. She adjusts her leather cap. She grips the controls. The engine roars. The wheels leave the ground. And for the first time in her life, Bessie Coleman is flying. Think about that moment. Think about the girl who walked 4 miles through Texas dust to a one-room schoolhouse with no shoes and no textbooks. Think about the young woman bending low over cotton rows in the 100-degree heat, telling herself she would amount to something. Think about the manicurist staying up past midnight with French grammar books spread out on a kitchen table in Chicago. Think about every rejection letter, every slammed door, every face that said, not for you. And now, see her. Above all of it, above the cotton fields, above the Jim Crow signs, above the rejection letters, above every ceiling anyone ever tried to place over her life, she is above all of it, and the sky, the beautiful, limitless, boundless sky, does not care what color she is. It does not ask for her papers. It does not check who her parents were. It does not know the word sharecropper. The sky simply holds her. And she flies. On that day, June 15th, 1921, the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale awarded Bessie Coleman International Pilot's License number 18,310. She was the first black woman in the world to earn a pilot's license, the first Native American woman, the first American woman to earn an international pilot's license, all three at once. One woman, three firsts, a lifetime of no, compressed into one resounding yes. When news reached the United States, it caused a sensation. The Chicago Defender ran her story across its front page. Readers who had never imagined that someone who looked like them could sit in the cockpit of an airplane suddenly could imagine it, because Bessie Coleman existed, and her existence was proof. Proof that the impossible was only impossible until someone decided it wasn't. Now, here is the part of Bessie Coleman's story that most people never hear, because here is where she becomes not just extraordinary, but undeniable. Bessie Coleman was famous by 1922. She was being booked for air shows across the country. She had crowds of thousands. She had headlines. She had offers. And she used all of it as a weapon against the very system that had tried to destroy her. In 1920s America, air shows were segregated. Black audiences and white audiences entered through different gates. They sat in different sections. They were treated as different classes of human being at the same event. Bessie Coleman looked at that, and she made a rule, a single unbreakable rule. I will not fly for any show that does not allow black and white audiences to enter through the same gate. Full stop. No negotiation, no exceptions, no matter how much they offered to pay her. Think about the courage that required. This was the 1920s. This was the American South. This was the world of the Ku Klux Klan, of lynchings, of black men and women beaten for a great deal less than what Bessie Coleman was demanding. And she, a 30-year-old black woman who had grown up with no money, no connections, no safety net, was telling powerful white promoters, "Meet my conditions, or I don't fly." And here's the extraordinary thing. They agreed because they needed her, because the crowds that came to see Bessie Coleman were not just black audiences, they were everyone. White spectators, journalists, politicians, other pilots, all of them coming to watch a woman who should not have existed, doing things that should not have been possible, and doing them beautifully. She gave lectures at churches, at schools, at theaters in black communities across the country. She screened films of her stunts to packed audiences, and then she talked to them. She talked to children who had never been told they could be anything. She talked to young women who had been told aviation was not for them. She talked to black men and women crushed under Jim Crow, and she looked them in the eye and said, "You can fly, not just me, you can do this." In 1923, Bessie Coleman bought her own plane, a Curtiss JN-4 Jenny. On her way to her first West Coast air show, the engine stalled. The plane hit the ground. It was destroyed. Bessie Coleman survived, but with a broken leg, fractured ribs, and injuries that would take months to heal. From her hospital bed, barely able to sit up, she told the doctors, "Patch me up well enough to perform." They said no. She was grounded for 3 months. 3 months later, she was back in the air. By 1925, Bessie Coleman was close, finally, achingly close, to her greatest dream of all. Not the fame, Not the air shows, not the headlines. She wanted to open a flight school for black aviators, a school where young black men and women, people who looked like her, who came from where she came from, could learn to fly, could take their place in the sky, the same sky as anyone else. She wrote to her sister, a letter full of joy and barely contained excitement. After her next air show, after the final payment on her plane was made, she would finally have enough money to open the school. She was 34 years old, she had nothing when she started, and she was almost there. April 30th, 1926. Jacksonville, Florida. Bessie Coleman climbed into a plane for a rehearsal flight. She was preparing for an air show the following day, a benefit for the Jacksonville Negro Welfare League. She was not flying the controls herself that day. Her mechanic, William Wills, was at the controls. Bessie was in the passenger seat, leaning over the side of the open cockpit, scouting the terrain below for a good parachute landing zone. She was not wearing a seatbelt. In the 1920s, planes had no rooftops, no harnesses. The sky was open above you, open below you, at approximately 3,500 feet. The plane went into an unexpected dive. Then a spin, a wrench. An unsecured, forgotten wrench left in the engine compartment during maintenance had worked its way into the control gears. The controls jammed. Bessie Coleman, who had defied gravity 1,000 times, who had danced above the clouds, who had crossed an ocean and learned a language and remade herself from nothing, fell. She was 34 years old. The school was never built, not by her hands. At her funeral, first in Jacksonville, then in Orlando, then in Chicago, the people came. Thousands in Jacksonville. 10,000 people filed past her coffin on the south side of Chicago. The great civil rights activist Ida B. Wells delivered her eulogy. They mourned, but they also carried her. They carried her forward into a future she had already begun building. With every flight, every speech, every integrated gate, every impossible thing she had refused to stop doing. Listen. Bessie Coleman did not live to open her school, but the school opened anyway. In 1929, just 3 years after her death, Lieutenant William J. Powell founded the Bessie Coleman Aero Club in Los Angeles, dedicated to training black pilots in her name. He wrote in his dedication, "Because of Bessie Coleman, we have overcome that which was worse than racial barriers. We have overcome the barriers within ourselves and dared to dream." Her dream rippled outward. The pilots she inspired, the communities she electrified with her flights, the children who sat in segregated stands and watched her loop the loop. Those children grew up, and some of them became the Tuskegee Airmen, the legendary black military aviators of World War II who flew more than 15,000 combat missions and never lost a single bomber they were escorting. Bessie Coleman planted that seed. And 66 years after her death, in September 1992, an astronaut named Dr. Mae Jemison became the first African-American woman to travel to space, aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour, and in her breast pocket on that historic mission. Dr. Jemison carried a photograph of Bessie Coleman. The girl from the cotton fields went to space. Today, airports across the United States have roads named after her. O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, Oakland International Airport in California, Tampa International Airport in Florida. The United States Postal Service printed her face on a stamp. Schools bear her name. Scholarships carry her legacy. And every black aviator who takes the controls today stands on ground that Bessie Coleman cleared. I want to speak to you directly now. Not about Bessie Coleman, about you. Whatever you are facing right now, however heavy it feels, however many times the door has been slammed, however many people have told you that what you want is not for someone like you, I want you to hold the story of Bessie Coleman in your mind. This was a woman born in a dirt floor cabin whose parents could not read or write, who picked cotton as a child, who was abandoned by her father, who ran out of money after one semester of college, who was rejected by every flight school in the United States of America. And she did not argue with the rejection. She did not write angry letters. She did not wait for the system to change. She changed her approach. She went around the wall. She learned a new language. She crossed an ocean. She bet everything on herself, on an idea so audacious that the entire world said it was impossible, and she made it possible. Here is what Bessie Coleman's life is telling you. The dream in your chest, the one that feels too big, the one that embarrasses you a little, the one you don't tell people about because you're afraid they'll laugh. That dream is not too big for you. You are too small right now for that dream, and that is the whole point. You are supposed to grow. You're supposed to learn the new language, whatever your language is, the new skill, the new city, the new version of yourself that the dream requires. Bessie Coleman was not born a pilot. She became one. In the same way, you are not yet who you are meant to be. You are becoming. The other thing Bessie Coleman teaches us is that you don't need permission. She did not wait for American flight schools to change their minds. She found a different runway, and she took off from there. Whatever is blocking your path right now, there is another runway. Maybe it's not the path you expected. Maybe it's harder. Maybe it takes longer. Maybe it requires you to leave behind something comfortable, maybe even to cross your own kind of ocean. But the runway exists. It always exists. Bessie Coleman once said, "You've never lived until you've flown." I believe that, not just in the literal sense, though I hope some of you will one day stand in a cockpit and understand exactly what she meant. I believe it in the deeper sense, that there is a version of your life, a version that is fully alive, where you have done the thing you were most afraid to do, where you have sent the application, made the phone call, started the business, moved to the new city, had the hard conversation, built the thing no one thought you could build. That version of you, the one on the other side of the fear, has never lived until they flew. And Bessie Coleman, a girl with bare feet in a cotton field, is proof that the flight is possible. She made it from a dirt floor cabin in Texas to the skies above 3 continents. She made it from the cotton rows to the front page of national newspapers. She made it from nothing to forever. And her name is on the roads leading to the airports where planes take off every single day, carrying people toward their dreams on wings that she, in part, made possible. Bessie Coleman. Queen Bess. Brave Bessie. The girl who refused to be caged by the world's opinion of who she was allowed to be. She is gone. But the sky she flew is still there. It's still there. And it is still boundless and free and waiting for you. If this story moved you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. A child who thinks the ceiling is real. A friend who has been told no one too many times. A version of yourself that still believes the rejection letters. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe, because we are just getting started. The next story is already waiting. Until then, fly.